Hi guys, how you doing? Something that I thought I would try and do this term is regular or fairly regular, depending how time goes and how much time I get, but hopefully fairly regular updates on what we've been looking at in lessons. Now this week had a lot of new drummers starting, which is fantastic, this week and last week. So we've been looking at our first ever grooves and fills. So a reminder, the first groove that we looked at is our crotchet or quarter note groove. It's got 12 notes in total, or 3 groups of 4. You may find it easier to count to 12 on this one, or you can count to 4 3 times, which is what we'll be aiming for a little later down the line. But if it's easier just to count to 12 for now, that's absolutely fine. Remember, the groove starts with our hand and our foot. So right-handers, it's right hand and right foot. So right foot on the bass drum, right hand on the cymbal, and then both hands together, left hand on the snare, right hand on the cymbal. For lefties, it's the other way around. So it's left foot and left hand, and then left hand and right hand. Here's what that looks like. Be sure when you're playing this that you don't end up playing the bass drum on all 4 notes. We want to keep that bass drum on number 1 and number 3, or if you're counting to 12, all of the odd numbers. The fill that we were using had 8 notes in it, so twice as many as the groove, which means we're going to be moving twice as quickly to fit all of those notes in. Right-handers, you're going to start with the right hand, right left, right left, right left, right left. Left-handers, other way round. So you start with your preferred hand, and we're trying to keep these notes as even as possible. Remember, it's not how fast can you play 8 notes, it's how evenly can you play them at twice the rate of the groove. So we'll start on the snare drum for that one. Here's what it looks like. Once you're happy with those 8 notes on the snare drum, start to think about moving them around the drum kit. We've got a snare drum and 3 toms in front of us, so 4 drums total, 2 on each will give us our 8 note fill. So that was the fill that we started with in our lessons this week, and here's what it sounds like again to remind you. So once we were happy with the groove on the ride cymbal, next up we moved it across to the hi-hat. Now that's on the other side of the drum kit, so we are crossing our arms over. Lefties, it's the other way round, you're crossing your arms from left to right. Right-handers, we're crossing from right to left. I'm doing a lot of this, aren't I? So we took our hand off the ride cymbal and over the top onto the hi-hat. Now this plays tricks on our brain because it looks different and it sounds different. It is exactly the same movement, so it's still our 12 notes, it's still the bass drum and the cymbal together. So right hand and right foot if you're right-handed, left hand and left foot if you're left-handed, and it always starts with the bass drum. So here's our groove again, played on the hi-hat, and I'll throw the 8th note fills in as well. Once we were happy we could play the groove on the ride and on the hi-hat separately, as well as put the eighth note fills around the drum kit, we put all of those ideas together. It doesn't matter which cymbal you start on, whether you start on the hi-hat or the ride. The idea is you play the 12-note groove followed by the fill and then move straight on to the next one. So if you started on the hi-hat, you go all the way through and then move on to the ride and go all the way through again. And the idea is to see how many times you can play that without stopping and without speeding up. A couple of things to watch out for here. It is really tempting when you get to the fill just to race around the drum kit. You've done the groove, it's fantastic, fill time, and just tear around the drum kit. We want to try and keep that fill as even as possible, and we're only moving at twice the rate of the groove, only double, no faster than that. Also, another thing to be careful of is when you're moving from the fill back to the groove, we want to be starting with the bass drum. So the groove always starts with one of the cymbals, hi-hat or ride, and the bass drum. It doesn't start with the snare drum. So beat one should never be both hands at the same time. It should be your foot and your hand. As you're no doubt aware, the Linear Matrix is now available. I'll put links below to all the stuff that I've been talking about and all the lesson notes and materials. The Linear Matrix series is a new series that I've wrote in conjunction with Alpine Publishing. It's a fantastic book looking at linear drumming in 8th notes, 16th notes and 8th note triplets. You've heard me go on and on and on about this in other videos and in lessons as well. Some of you guys were looking at the 16th note Linear Matrix book this week, and we were looking at the fills and speed exercises. The first fill in the book uses the letters D, B, C and D from the matrix. Now if you're not sure what I'm talking about with matrix and matrix letters, a good way to think about the matrix is all the different combinations you can make with something. So moving away from music for a second, let's think about money. If you think about a pound coin, you can make a pound with £1 coin, you can make it with 250p's, you can make it with 100 pennies and so on and so on. All the different options that you've got available, well let's think, what are they? We've got 1p pieces, 2p's, 5s, 10s, 20s and 50s. Now if you wrote down every combination between all of those different coins that added up to a pound, that would be your £1 matrix. Have I made that make more sense or less sense? That was very wordy. So short version of that is all the different options you have available to create something. So the linear matrix is all the different options we have to create linear fills, speed exercises and grooves. So back to the letters. The first fill in the 16th note matrix is D, B, C, D. So I'll play that on the snare drum for you first so you can see what that looks and sounds like. Once you've got the fills sorted out, it's important, and this isn't just for linear fills, this is for any type of new fill, to put it with a groove. Same goes for if you're learning a new groove. Once you've got the hang of that, you want to put it with some of your existing fills. Everything that we learn needs to work with everything else that we already know. They're not isolated, separate exercises. The whole point of this is they're adding to our vocabulary. So if we're learning new fills, we want to put them with existing grooves. If we're learning new grooves, we want to put them with existing fills. So here's an example of that using a quaver groove and some variations along with our linear matrix fill. Once you're happy that you can play the fill on the snare drum and with an existing groove, it's time to orchestrate it around the drum kit. Now in the book, I talk about 4 different orchestrations: clockwise, anti-clockwise, 11s, and X marks the spot. But these are just some to get you started. There are so many different ways you could move this around the drum kit. Have a go, experiment, come up with your own ideas of where this fill can be played on your drum kit. You might have less drums than I've got on my drum kit, more drums than I've got on my drum kit, more or less than the drums we've got at school. That's fine. Pick the orchestration that you think sounds the best and put that fill and that orchestration together along with one of the grooves. That was another very wordy explanation. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. You might find that playing the entire fill in one go is a little bit tricky to start with, and that's absolutely fine. Try each of the component letters one at a time. So for example, this fill is D, B, C, D. Now you'll notice it has D in it twice. I find the letter D the easiest of all the matrix letters to play. I also find C one of the trickiest to play. Now that comes before D in the matrix. It's not in difficulty order. So when you're looking at all the fills and you think, wow, I found this fill really difficult and there's loads more to look at, they're not in difficulty order. So if you get stuck, you can always move on to a different one and come back. Try and see which matrix letter it was that was causing you the problem and separate that letter. So for example, if you find D really tricky, you might just want to practice a bar of D on its own. You might need to do that for 1 letter, 2 letters, or all of the letters. That's absolutely fine. Once you're happy that you've got it down, put the fill back together and see how you go. You might also want to think about orchestrating the letters individually. So let's go back to letter D again. Here's one of my favourite orchestrations for the letter D. I'm just going to play the same thing over and over so you can see what I'm talking about. Now you can do that for 1 letter or all of the letters. You can put the letters in the combinations that are in the book, or you can think of your own. That's absolutely fine. There are literally, and I'm not exaggerating, millions of combinations that you can create just using the 16th note matrix. Have some fun with it, see what you can come up with. So there you go, a brief overview of some of the main things that we've been looking at in class this week. Now don't worry, you might have been looking at something else in your lessons this week. That's fine, haven't got time to go through every single individual lesson, just picking out some of the highlights from this week. If you've got some stuff that you would like to see in this video, or things that we've covered in lessons that you'd like me to talk about in a little bit more detail, do let me know. Have a look on the YouTube channel, see if I've already done a video on it. Have a look on the website, see if there's some things in the lesson resources page that might be of use. If not, let me know and we'll put something together in a video like this one. So that's it for now, guys. I hope you enjoyed this and you found it useful. If you've got any questions, do please feel free to let me know. I'll see you at your next week's lesson. Take care and enjoy your drumming.